The forum published in 2016 and again in 2020 certain skills that they believe will be critical for future success. Some of the skills that were mentioned were analytical thinking, complex problem solving, creativity, flexibility, but also some what would also often be called human skills or success skills like entrepreneurial spirit, grit, resiliency. However, disruptive forces such as automation, artificial intelligence, climate change, and most recently the COVID-19 pandemic are accelerating the pace of change for this world of work. These future skills, as identified by the World Economic Forum, are actually beginning to emerge in today's workplace. And so this leads us to today's presentation, and where we are joined by, right now, 3, hopefully soon 4, thought leaders who are witnessing firsthand how these future skills and disruptive forces are affecting the world of work. I'm honored to introduce Renee Blinkwolt, Lisa Carlson, Thomas Healy, and eventually, oh, she is with us, great, Leah Lizarondo. To start, I'd like to ask each panelist to offer a few words about themselves as an introduction. So let's start with Renee. Would you mind sharing your background and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Renee. As Kevin said, I am a CMU alum. I have a BFA in directing from the School of Drama, and I also have a BA in history. So I was a strange double major out of the College of Fine Arts. I'm currently the executive director and executive producer at Ars Nova, which is a nonprofit arts organization in New York City, dedicated to discovering, developing, and launching the next generation of theater, comedy, and music artists. And we sort of specialize in the untraditional overlap of all 3 of those things. So if we can, we're really firing on all cylinders if we can introduce you to a new artist that you discover and also a new form of live performing art that they're creating. I have also an MFA in producing and theater management from Columbia University and have worked in various capacities at almost every small nonprofit theater in New York City, as well as some of the larger ones. So that's a brief me.
Thank you, Renee. We really appreciate it and welcome. Lisa, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, welcome everyone. We are so excited to be here today. I'm Lisa Carlson. I am a university recruiter for Gartner and directly aligned to CMU. So I've been coming to CMU for the past 2 years and really excited to continue to work with the students each year and especially this spring semester. I've been at Gartner for 2.5 years, university recruiting the whole time, and I've had about 4 years of experience in that area. I studied 2 totally different things in undergrad. So I was a double major in strategic communications and psychology. So really excited to talk today about how you can study what you want, but where that future can take you. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lisa. Thomas.
Thanks, Kevin. So hi, everyone. My name is Thomas Healy. I graduated undergrad at CMU back in 2014. With a double major in mechanical engineering as well as engineering and public policy. From there, I decided to stay on at Carnegie Mellon for a 5th year studying a master's in mechanical engineering, but I ended up actually dropping out during that master's program to go start Hyliion. So through undergrad, I had done a couple of startups, had a bunch of fun with it. When I was in that grad program, started Hyliion. That was about 5 years ago now, and it's been one heck of a journey since then. We started, very organically, as you kind of can imagine, a startup in a college environment. And then from there, this past year, we've recently announced that we took Hyliion public. So we're now trading on the New York Stock Exchange. Since inception, we've raised a little over $750 million in capital to be able to go grow our company. And the focus of it is bringing electrified powertrain solutions to the commercial vehicle space. So, You think of Tesla passenger cars, we're doing that same sort of a concept, but we're doing it for the big semi trucks that you see going down the highway. So that's a little background on me.
Thank you, Thomas. It's always good to hear that a CMU dropout has done well for himself. So that's excellent. Leah, would you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, my name is Leah Lizarondo. I am the founder of a technology platform called Food Rescue Hero and co-founder of 412 Food Rescue, which is a local nonprofit that uses the platform. My career has been, kind of treading the whole future of work as it evolves. I graduated from business school in the Philippines. I grew up in the Philippines. Worked for consumer goods in New York City for right after school. Worked for Colgate-Palmolive in brand management. And around that time, the first tech boom was happening. So shifted my career towards technology. And then moved to Pittsburgh to attend Heinz College, Heinz School at that time. And shifted my work towards more social enterprise, which is what 412 Food Rescue and Food Rescue Hero is.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. And, let's jump right in with a few questions. This first one, I'd like all of our panelists to consider. I started off this webinar by mentioning some of the skills that the World Economic Forum has said is critical for the future of work. The analytical thinking, complex problem solving, creativity, entrepreneurial spirit, grit. I know you've seen these lists. I'd like to ask each of you to choose one skill that has been influential in your career success or that you feel will be critical for your future career success. And I'll let anybody jump in.
Well, maybe I'll go ahead and get it kicked off. And, the one I feel like I have to really touch on is the entrepreneurial one, because that is Hyliion. That's what we've been doing for the last 5 years. And, I think this applies, having an entrepreneurial spirit both applies to whether or not you want to be a founder of a company and go start something on your own, or if you want to actually be joining a company, whether small or large, you need to have an entrepreneurial side of you, because that's what's really going to move an organization forward, right? I mean, a company is looking at recruiting people or hiring people that are going to come in and be change agents and try to move the organization forward. And one of the really strong ways to do that is to be able to look around, figure out problems, figure out opportunities, and then come up with solutions of how you can make that problem go away, or take something and make it better. And that's really being an entrepreneur. And then going through nothing's ever easy. It's a roller coaster, right? You'll work on things, and you'll have successes, you'll have things that you fall short on, but ultimately you keep on pushing and persevering through it, and ultimately you get to really strong solutions. And so that's what when you're a recruiter or hirer of an organization, that's what you want to see out of the candidates that you're bringing into your company. You're not looking for just another person to come in and be kind of yes, I'll do exactly what you want me to do, and I'll stay within the boundaries. You need to do that, but also be able to push things and really innovate and try to move an organization forward.
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of dovetail off that and agree with it. The entrepreneurial spirit actually covers many of the other things, such as grit. And I think one of the best signals for this for me was when I was just starting my career at Colgate-Palmolive, and I was a junior brand manager, and we were facing a particularly difficult challenge. And I remember, suggesting a solution, and my boss, who was the country marketing director then, came back to me and said, that's very entrepreneurial. This memory sticks out to me, even through all of these years. And I didn't understand that then, because I didn't feel like corporate work was entrepreneurial. I didn't equate the two, but then I understood it much later on in my career as a way of approaching things and as a way of work. And the people that I value in my team currently, and as I, proceeded in my career, has been those individuals that, as Thomas has said, have, come up with solutions. It's not business as usual. And also really understanding, the risk reward equation. And and being a little bit biased towards some of that risk to move things forward.
I'll dovetail off of that. I totally agree with the entrepreneurial spirit, and I think, but I'm going to focus on grit because I think it's like hand in hand, because in order to be innovative and to be entrepreneurial, you have to take risk. And if you're going to take risk, you're going to fail sometimes, right? Things are not going to work out. And that is where I think grit really comes into play. My industry is actually a very hard industry. I know, arts people might have a reputation of being flighty and flowery, but actually my industry is, there are very few pathways to success. Those pathways are inconsistent. It can work one way for one person and another person can try that same way and have it totally not work. It's also sort of rife with exploitative practices. When you're just starting out, you can get offered jobs that pay you in passion and fulfillment for a long time. So you really have to have a certain amount of grit just to persevere, just to make it long enough for the opportunities to start to really match up with your talent, your training, your skill set. And grit for me, in my career has meant kind of a never say die attitude, right? And that's where I think it dovetails with innovation and an entrepreneurial spirit, that like, if there's a thing I'm trying to achieve, if there's an idea I have that I believe can work, I try again. If it didn't work that way, I'm going to go left. If left didn't work, try under. If under didn't work, go through until I get to an outcome that's satisfactory, whether that's, personal career fulfillment or the product, which for me is usually an ephemeral piece of art. But grit has been totally necessary in every step of my career, and is totally necessary in all of the tasks I have in my role as a leader.
Absolutely. And to piggyback off of both of those, they all go hand in hand really together. All of these skills are going to become more and more important as the world continues to change. And so all the entrepreneurial spirit and the grit, I really take focus on the adaptability. With both of those, you need to be adaptable. So as Renee just mentioned, you're going to continue to fail first, and then how do you overcome that? So maybe at that fail mark, you have to rethink and be creative. So how can you be adaptive? What new process can you innovate? How can you really change the way you're thinking to be successful? Something important we do at Gartner, we actually trait-based hire here. We look for not necessarily the best backgrounds or experiences, but we look for personality traits into people. And those are going to continue to grow as the world continues to present these different forces that are going to make us continue to change and drive stronger and faster forces of work. And we constantly talk about adaptability at Gartner and how the world is never going to be as slow as it is today, right now. It's only going to get faster. And how can you adapt your skills and the way you think to those ever changes?
Thank you. I really appreciate all those insights, and Lisa, what you just mentioned about the speed. And I think I can share the amount of information that I receive every day is tenfold what it was 5 years ago, 100-fold what it was when I graduated college. So that speed really resonated. So thank you for that. Talking about skills, I also had mentioned that the disruptive forces that are happening in industry today, and let's get it out in the open to address one of the most disruptive forces facing us today, being the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I'm going to throw this out to Renee, but again, please, all our panelists, feel free to jump in. But for Renee, I know all of industry has been affected by the pandemic, but the entertainment industry has been particularly affected. What adaptations have been positive for your organization or industry? And do you anticipate some of these practices continuing even past when we're past the pandemic?
Yeah, I'm on a panel for an industry that doesn't exist right now. It's so fun. There's actually been some really, I think, bright spots that have come out of our industry being essentially shut down. We were the first to close, and we seemingly will be the last to reopen. One of them has been a refocus on who we serve. And this was part of Ars Nova's initial response, which is our mission is to discover, develop, and launch emerging artists. And so we, at the very beginning of the pandemic, had to ask, how do we do that if we cannot follow any of the pathways that we have always followed in terms of doing that by seeing work, generating work, developing work, and premiering work. And we started to focus simply on paying them to continue to stay artists in New York City. Like, we had to take it down to the very core of what we do. But I would say, so the refocus on that and the recentering on the service to people has been very helpful, and I think something that will not go away in our industry or no longer be ignored. And then secondarily, and equally as importantly, there was never any future for the live performing arts that excluded or ignored technological innovations. And now the rest of my industry has been forced to admit and embrace that fact. And there is no going back from it, and hallelujah. And I mean, truly, all of my industry. So unions have had to embrace that. I think a lot of people don't realize that the Union for Live Performing Arts has forbidden any sort of digital capture or exploitation of that live art. So they've had to, that has been pushed and expanded. The artists themselves, live performance generative artists have had to rethink how they can do what they do in different modes. And then producing and presenting organizations like mine are starting to think about how you can connect audiences to that art, and what different distribution modes there are that we can make use of. So I think when, like right now, Ars Nova launched a digital streaming platform. We're all digital for, I think it'll end up being at least a year. And when we are able again to gather people in person, that digital component will not go away. This has been happening for long enough that there's an expectation of that convenience. I imagine there are some people watching this panel now that really miss going to a concert or going to a theater, going to a show in person. I imagine there are some others watching that really love being able to tune into something in their pajama pants and like get their culture in a very convenient, low impact way. And that's not going to change when the pandemic is over, whatever the pandemic being over means. So I think when we come back, we'll need to continue to adapt and innovate and continue to embrace that technology. And that is something that is really exciting to me for my industry, and I think will only lead to more arts lovers, culture lovers, more art, and more work for artists, which are all good things.
Thank you, Renee. That's very insightful. You know, your comment, it just got me thinking about how many Hamilton fans are now in Lincoln, Nebraska, who had never seen Hamilton until it was put on Disney Plus, and now they have access to the arts that they never had before because of a geographic location or financial limitations. So that's really, you know, very insightful. I'd like to throw something over to Lisa. You know, we were talking about entrepreneurial spirit, and you know, many of the audience members here, they're going to be going into, we'll call it corporate America. They're going to be going into a large company corporate setting. And I was wondering about Gartner in particular, about how does Gartner, I guess, develop or enhance these future skills that we've been talking about? You know, how do you develop them in your employees, and what can, you know, what should our audience members look for, you know, when they're when they're thinking of a future employer, what things should they look for so that they are joining an organization that will develop these future skills, as opposed to, I think Thomas was saying, just kind of going in and being a yes person and just doing the job. And so, just some thoughts on that, Lisa?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm here to speak even as a Gartner associate. Within 9 months of being at the firm, I did get promoted. So I think what the first thing is really looking for those growth companies, right? So where can you grow, and is it even in the right career path? I know we talked about that at the beginning. So not just pigeonholing yourself to one career path, but looking for companies that are going to allow you to grow and continue to explore other opportunities. So one way to really check on this and do a pulse check for corporate America is, is the company sectored off? At Gartner, we're not sectored off. So if you really want to go into, you're in one career path, I'm in HR, you want to go into our research division, that's something that my manager's now held accountable to when I bring that up to him. So he's now held accountable to get me exposure into our research sector, so that when I go to apply for that next position, I have all of the tools in my toolkit to be successful. So I think you definitely want to be looking at different factors to make sure that you're going to be able to expand many different skills at one firm. And that's not always the case, and that's okay if you need to switch careers or want to change. But I think as you look to enter into the workforce, I think some questions you need to think about are, is this a growth company? Is the company sectored off? What does that growth path look for me vertically and laterally? Those are two totally different questions, and definitely important ones as well. What is the review process? How am I going to get feedback? Being very clear up front with your expectations is going to allow and help you identify the best fit on the other side. I always like to say that sometimes when you don't get a job, it's really disheartening and you can kind of take a hit from that and you fail, but you have to remember that it's a match on both sides. Maybe you just dodged a complete bullet, that it wasn't a good fit for you too. And you have to remember that. So your career search is just as much in your power as it is in the company being able to give you that next round interview. So at Gartner, we constantly give review and planning. We have a whole entire feedback portal. I just delivered feedback today to one of my peers. It was pretty tough, but I never used to do that. And now it's day in and day out. I get feedback every single day as well. I received it this morning from my manager. And so if that's the type of environment that you really want those transparent conversations, you should be looking and asking for that as well. So I think while there's a lot of pretty standards for this quote unquote corporate America and the typical things that happen, I think the first thing is to really identify what's the best fit and being able to overcome those challenges. The second thing is let's say you land in a place that might have more rigid rules, right? You enter into this new exciting opportunity and it's not exactly what you're expecting. Don't be afraid to change and challenge that a little bit. I know there's a lot of standards out there, but really try to push and try to create an innovative solution that might be able to help the company improve a process they didn't even know has been going on for years. So within that first year, you might not know a difference, but as you think of things that might make a process better or faster, definitely approach different people and share your ideas, because you actually might be bringing something totally new to the table that they've never even thought about before.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. A lot of great, food for thought there about, evaluating opportunities and the corporate culture too. Especially, I think a lot of us look for those vertical opportunities, but those lateral ones to kind of really grow the breadth of skills. That's very important. Thank you. I think this next question, anybody can answer this, but I'm going to give it to Leah first, and then let her have that first dibs on this one. Because of your the technology that you've developed, the Food Rescue Hero technology platform, because we're seeing the increase of automation and artificial intelligence in every industry sector, and how that is changing how we do work. But I'm also wondering, how does that change the skills that you look for in in staff members and employees, with automation, artificial intelligence, taking care of certain things, technology platforms, automating processes, how has that changed what you value in employees? Oh, Leah, just 1 second. I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, it's the phrase of the year, right? So I would say, there's core skills, or I would say traits that is universal to all of the key hires that I make. And that's, going back to your first question on, entrepreneurship, entrepreneurialism, adaptability, grit, creativity, risk taking, all of those, no matter whether you're a software developer or, you're in strategic marketing, those are the things that is consistent throughout. Now, in terms of, technologies and AI, those are things that, can be continuously learned, right? And it's all about supporting your teams so that they have access to that continuous learning. I am a firm believer that you can, if you have the right traits, you can learn pretty much anything. And there's enough, of other things that you can also outsource, which, that you hire, a head of engineering, for instance, that is a leader that can manage that outsourcing and understand, how to prioritize. So I would say nothing changes at the core in terms of what I look for, because everything can be learned or outsourced. But the core of your organization, your leadership, what really drives it is the people.
Thank you so much. It's good to hear, about those core skills. Thomas, I haven't forgotten about you, so I'm going to throw a question your way. And again, anybody can jump in on this. You mentioned Hyliion having a good year, going public, making certain strategic partnerships. And many of our attendees want to know when an opportunity arises. For example, I know you partnered with a battery at the organization about going public, moving offices, things like that. When an opportunity arises, how do you know this is one I want to take and this is one that I think I'm going to pass on?
Sure. So I think one of the things that I learned pretty early on in Hyliion is when these opportunities are in front of you and when they arise, you never have all of the information that you need in order to make the right decision. So you kind of need to position yourself with the mindset that you're going to have between like 50 and 70% of the information you really need, maybe up to 80% in order to make the decision. And then you kind of need to go with that gut reaction of, yeah, this is the right thing to do for the organization. Let's move forward with it. To use some examples, like we decided actually to relocate our company from Pittsburgh down to Austin, Texas. And what we found was that we were starting to get senior executives that had been in startups before. We could source those individuals out of Austin versus we were struggling to find that in Pittsburgh. But you got to imagine being a startup where you're working on this vision. You're thinking about potentially relocating a company. That disrupts it, right? You're going to lose probably half of your team because they're not going to move. And at that point, we really weren't in a position to do, a lot of remote work. We did do some, but, it was one of these things where it's like, okay, well, if we shift the company down there, we think we can probably find talent that we wouldn't have been able to find otherwise. But at the same point, we're going to lose some of the legacy employees that we have. And you don't have all the facts around that in order to be sure that you're making the right decision, but it's kind of that gut feeling. And that's one of the things you learn fast in the entrepreneurial spirit is to trust your gut instinct and reaction and kind of be willing to make that best judgment call. And then the other thing is once you make that call, once you make the decision, don't look back on it. The decision's made, right? And just do the best thing you can with it, right? So maybe you made a decision and, now you're thinking, you're sitting here and saying, oh, well, hindsight's 2020. If I had known this and that back then, I would have gone down a different path. Well, that's all well and good and everything, but you can't go back, right? You can't change what you already decided. So now just take all the puzzle pieces that you do have in front of you and make the most out of it. And if you keep working on that with that sort of a mentality, you'll get there, right? Because you're constantly innovating with the new pieces you have, and you need to be willing to pivot very, very quickly. We've actually made some really large company and strategy decisions in the matter of hours, and it's literally like someone brings forward something, it's, a critical piece of information that then cascades over multiple things that we're doing in the company. And then we're willing to just grab the right people that we need to get them together in a room, say, here's the new facts we have. With these, what do we need to do? And then from there, you make a decision and you run with it. And, you need to just, not be looking back at the past of did you make the right decisions or not, and constantly just be looking forward as with the mindset of, with the latest information I have, am I making the smartest choices now?
I saw a lot of nodding heads from our panelists. Does anybody want to chime in there about that? Especially when he was talking about that 50 to 80% of the information, not looking back. Does anybody want to jump in?
Good. I mean, as an entrepreneur, that ambiguity is something you have to be comfortable with. And, it's not everyone has that. It's this sense of comfort with imperfect information, and then coupling that with what you feel in your gut and sticking with it. And then just, again, I love how Thomas put it, and not looking back, because you've already made that decision. And, every decision you make is from that point. There's no, there's the concept of sunk costs that is more common, but it's like, you just keep on moving forward. And it's, as an entrepreneur, you've got to find some enjoyment, some level of enjoyment in that ambiguity, because it's a lot of that work is kind of cloaked with that.
I would just add, I totally agree, and I would add that specifically at Ars Nova, it as an organization has the most alignment around values that I've ever been a part of or had the pleasure to lead. And actually that value alignment, right? Like, I think if you asked any of our employees, right now what our core values were, they would be able to tell you, like, they're ingrained in folks and they deeply believe in them. And that actually really facilitates leveraging opportunity, recognizing opportunity, and the quick decision making that's often required in order to make the most of opportunity. You have to be able to act fast. And I think when we talk about like making gut decisions, often that's actually the gut check for us, at least, is in value alignment, right? Does this fit in our cultural company values? Does this fit in our mission? And that will often be the thing that draws people towards the right decision.
Thank you. I mean, just that's gold. These are just gold nuggets here. Leah, I think you might want to copyright "comfortable with imperfect information." That one definitely. I think I see a management book in your future there. That's fantastic. I want to go back to something Renee said pretty early on about you're going to fail. And let's face it, all of us have failed. We've run into obstacles. We've met with where we've fallen short of our hopes and expectations. And I would just love to throw this out to everybody. How have you overcome those obstacles when you have failed or when you've fallen short? How do you not give up? Because Renee, as you're saying, that's hard. It's disheartening, I think, is the term you used. How do you stay positive? How do you pick yourself back up? What's your advice to this future generation?
I mean, I'm happy to say the key way I've done it, which is to build real, meaningful relationships with colleagues and to ask for help when I need it. One of my key tenets as a leader and as a collaborative creator is that I show up, right? Like I just show up. I'm there when you need me. I'm there sometimes just to see if you might need me, even though you didn't ask me to be there, that I show up. And what I've found is that that approach really builds trust and builds meaningful, deep relationships between colleagues. Maybe not always friendships, but meaningful, deep relationships that where you can trust each other, that you have each other's back. And those deep relationships allow for a safety and vulnerability, and therefore allow you to be able to say, I don't know what way to go forward here. I don't know exactly what I want next. Or in a meeting yesterday where we were talking about, how to respond to the latest, COVID restrictions and problems and challenges in our producing efforts, right? I was able to say, I don't know the answer. Like, I feel really uncomfortable right now because I don't know how to guide this moment. And there's safety in that, and the team can pick us up. Or there's even safety to be able to say, like, I was wrong about that. It had a negative impact on us. How are we going to get through it together? And people can lift us up and lift me up. So I think my go-to answer for what I do in moments of failure or rejection is rely on the individual relationships and the help that those can provide and the guidance that those can provide.
So Kevin, if I can add a little bit to it, because there's a few different elements here. I mean, there's one is the like perseverance, which really just comes from you, right? I mean, it's, you have the choice of whether you're going to keep pushing, even if you fail, to keep moving forward. So that's purely in your hands. But then some of this is in the company's hands as well. And it really comes down to what the company culture is. Because if you go and you join an organization that has a culture where if you make a mistake, if you fail, and then your boss is going to, pull you into their office and yell at you and like, why the heck did you make this decision? And, lose it on you, you're never going to go willing, you will never be willing to step out of the boundaries again in order to try to push things forward. So if you're someone that is likes taking those risks and steps and pushing things, then you need to make sure that you're in a company that has a culture that is receptive to that. There was a question that just came in on the Q&A panel about, like, if you're in a large company, how do you change that resistance to, how do you influence that resistance to change? And the reality is that really needs to be a top-down change that needs to come in an organization. And if you're joining at a lower level in a company, you need to make sure you're finding a company or joining a company that already has a culture that's like that, because truly that is something that's a top-down, and all the leadership team needs to be behind it. That we're willing to fail fast and learn from it and move forward. And one of the things is when you're joining an organization, make sure there's a strong chemistry with the boss that you have there, because that's the person that they can take one of two ways, right? When you make a mistake, they can, be really difficult on you and just, not appropriately difficult on you, or they can be, coaching you. Okay, yes, you made this mistake, and here's how you can do it better the next time. You want to find a boss that is on the latter end, because then that allows you to really grow your skill set. And then the one last piece of advice I'll add, as you're going into organizations, into companies, the worst thing that you can do is when you make a mistake, try to deflect it, defer it, try to put it on someone else, because your manager sees through it. Your managers aren't stupid, right? So they know if you made a mistake, they know you did it, right? And you just need to own up to it and accept it and present what happened. The thing that frustrates me the most is when someone's made a mistake, I know it happened, and then they come in with all these excuses. And that's when I lose a ton of trust in that individual, because it's like, well, they make a mistake and then they're willing to lie about it, that they made the mistake. And that's the worst of all worlds.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I just wanted to add one short thing on that, in that, that there's failing, a project failing, an initiative, an idea. And then there's make a very clear distinction between that and repeated mistakes. So I would say I have less patience for the latter than the former. and actually have a complete bias for the former, and wanting people to, make their internal calculus before they act, and really, if it fails, understand why that happened, because they did calculate the probability somehow and still went with it. And I respect that a lot. Now, if it happens all the time after, some reflection and review, and happens again and again, then that's not a bias towards, fail and risk and innovation. That's something else.
That's a problem. Yes. Lisa, you also want to join in.
Yes, I mean, these are all great points. And I think Renee and Thomas and Leah just hit it perfectly on the head. What I was going to piggyback off of is own it first, is just recognize, self-reflect that you have failed and that the impact you've made has affected X, Y, and Z. From there, then I think you can change and adapt your process to what are those next steps? What did the data tell me? And where can I make a different strategy move forward? And the other thing I want to piggyback off of is Thomas's point, to find the right company to see if our failure is okay. What does that look like? And asking that question at the beginning. I know at Gartner, we are constantly innovating. I failed a ton of times. And we have a culture of a teammate's going to say, own it, and then let's pick you back up so you never do that again. And I've been a lending hand to a lot of people as well. So back to Renee's point, you have to have that really great support group in order to make sure that you know who to turn to for the right resources as soon as you do fail. So as soon as you own it, you can turn to the right next steps and move forward from it. Sometimes when you have a goal and you're really stuck on one goal, sometimes if you keep failing on that goal, it might not be the right direction to keep thinking. So it's just thinking outside of the box and really identifying other resources to help you move forward from that.
This is just fantastic advice. And Thomas referenced our Q&A, and so I want to make sure we get the student questions addressed. And so attendees, if you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A. And I'd like to throw out the first one. Renee, you have a fan, School of Drama. All right. And so one of our attendees is studying the production technology. It's a newest major in the School of Drama. But she asks this for all the panelists. Do you have advice on how to reach out to different areas of interest, and advice on gaining confidence in jumping into that unknown? So, I'll let Renee, since this is one of your charges, let you jump in first. But please, everyone, feel free to jump in.
Shout out to the dramat. I think I'm going to answer the gain confidence to jump into the unknown. And I have no idea if this is true or not, but I still say it to myself and it helps me do that. So I'll just share what it is, which is that everyone else is making it up as they go too. The emperor truly has no clothes. There's nobody like I now I can say, as someone running a company, like I just answered in the last question, I said, like, I just admitted to my team, like, I don't know what to do in this particular instance. I don't know the right answer. So what I mean by that is everyone is dealing with their own unknowns. We also talked earlier about being comfortable with imperfect information, right? Like incomplete information. We're all processing unknowns and unknowables, right? There's the known unknowns and then there's the unknown unknowns, and we're all in that together. So just reminding myself that I'm not sitting in a room or sitting across a table or emailing somebody to ask for a meeting or an informational that has all of the answers and is super comfortable all of the time and super confident all of the time. I'm talking to another human being that has just as much unknown and questions and struggle in their approaches as well. So reminding myself of that helps give me confidence.
can jump in here as well. I think something really important as you're navigating into specific industries or that unknown space is to do a lot of research. Utilize your resources first to understand what you're trying to accomplish, right? So it can be scary when you're jumping into what area am I trying to get into? Where am I trying to get involved? But for all of you here today, you showed up, and that's important. You're starting that step forward to learn more information and gather that research. And so I would say that the first and foremost is to research, utilize your resources, and get that first step in, and then you can move forward from there. I get a lot of times questions about networking and meeting new people and how to do that properly. And it is tough. You have to do it very strategically, at least for Gartner, and to identify a recruiter's eye. It can be very tough. And it depends on the firm, and it depends on the individual. So we get blasted with tons of asks for phone calls or just connections on LinkedIn. And how do you stand out? Well, it's just by showing us your personality. Who are you? Why are you interested in this opportunity? And really being able to showcase your skill set in a short letter. And I think that's really important when you're trying to navigate and network, to understand where you really want to go. I never hesitate to jump on the phone with a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, or a senior, because you don't know sometimes until you have that interesting conversation. Even internally, I have tons of conversations with people wanting to join our team, and they don't know what they don't know until they have a quick 15-minute conversation. So my best advice is research, use resources, and then start reaching out and start building your network in a very strategic way to know and cross-identify what you don't want to know what you do want.
Excellent. I'm going to throw this question over to Leah and Thomas that was asked. What is the hardest part about starting a company? And what advice would you give to overcome that challenge? So since you've both started organizations, what was the hardest part of starting it? And what advice would you give to overcome that challenge?
Yeah, so I'll maybe kick it off with, I think the toughest thing is you got to create like a far out there vision. I think, people often refer to it as like the big, hairy, like audacious goal, right? Like the thing that's way out there that you have no idea how you're going to get there. You have to come up with that first. And then you need to be able to rein yourself back in and figure out what is that next step you need to take in order to start making progress. Because I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck before, where they kind of come up with this grand vision, but they have no idea where to start. And they're trying to do like a bunch of little things to get started. And the reality is you need to like come up with the goal and then totally step back and just figure out what's the next step I can take today, tomorrow, the next day, and keep going. And you'll find that you'll eventually get to, where you're ultimately trying to be. But entrepreneurs will often get overwhelmed by the vision is too big and they don't know where to take the first step.
Yeah. So so agreed, definitely, basically understanding how to break that down into, milestones or achievable steps. But, I'm going to be really practical here and say you need money. And if you are not independently funded by yourself, and if you are the entrepreneur and you are the chief evangelist, and you're probably the one who's going to be able to talk about it with enough passion and belief that someone is going to actually fund it, then focus your work on that and find people who will actually operationalize it, because you can't do all of it. I mean, of course, you will do all of it in the beginning. There's no way around that. But, without funding, it's an idea. And, and without, an idea that, is not realized is just, I don't know what's that saying? It's just regret, right? So it's really all about that. It's balancing, again, your to-dos, and then, finding the capacity to be able to make, those first steps happen that will take you to the next step and the next step.
And raising money is not easy.
No, yeah, it's like, and the one thing, kind of related to the other question, how to jump in, one thing I learned at the very beginning is that, if you don't ask, the default answer is no. So you develop a thick skin real fast at no, and don't take it personally at all. It's just no, and you just have to try.
And listen to their feedback though, because even when they say no, there's usually good nuggets of things that they're willing to share with you. And then take that, learn from it, and keep moving forward.
That's phenomenal advice. And Leah, just what you were saying about your baby, your idea, your concept, giving it to somebody else to operationalize because you're needed in other areas. For example, like fundraising, talking to potential customers and clients. That's got to be so hard to, entrust, somebody else, to start giving up parts of the organization. So yeah, it really great answers. Another question came in. Person, thank you all the panelists for the insights. This is probably more of a kind of a work culture. Wondering how to cope with people holding different views of directions of your work. If your boss has a different view of direction of your work and you can't persuade them, should you try just to go with your boss's direction, or should you hold on to your own view? Thoughts on, when to stay your course, when to follow the boss?
That's a tough one. I'll jump in here. That's definitely a really tough one. I think that you start off, you show why you think your way it might be work better, or what might be this new process, or your project might really make an impact. And if your boss is continually saying this won't work, you really have to go my direction, this is really important. And this is something that's going to be common too, right? Every way you want to create, if you have a very creative mind, you might try something new every time. I don't think you should let the idea go, but I definitely think you should try to incorporate and maybe come to a compromise with your boss and say, hey, can we incorporate this idea as well, and see if this would take off. I think coming to a level ground, or showing maybe the why behind yours versus theirs, and what would make that outcome look different, is really important. It's a tough conversation for sure. I think it goes back to what kind of work culture you're involved in as well. I know at Gartner, I constantly challenge my boss. I think he thinks that every day I'm going to present something new, and that's something that's okay at Gartner. And I love that about our firm, is that I can constantly change and challenge process and bring my ideas and try it. And if I fail, okay, I was wrong, I'll own it, and then we walk away. But I think if that's not the culture you're in, and this is a really common practice, I think you have to start coming to a compromise and continue to see where your ideas and their ideas can fit together to make the outcome for the organization better.
Now is my turn to be muted. Let me throw out, we have time for probably a couple more questions. A question coming about your pre-work experience. What experience or experiences best prepared you for entering the world of work or for starting a business?
Yeah, so I'd say that while you're at Carnegie Mellon, be willing to take risks. Start stuff there, right? When you're in college, you have this amazing opportunity of, you've got this like safety net underneath you, that even if you fail at what you're doing, you still come back and you're a student there, and you're going to graduate with a great degree. So try things while you're in college, while you have this opportunity that you can take risks, and when you fail, you still have a huge safety net. So just start doing things there, whether it's joining different organizations, or doing a startup while you're there, or just willing to push the boundaries while you're in college.
Again, dovetailing off that, since most of you are in school, taking advantage of internship opportunities as low risk opportunities to try and understand what you don't want to do. So often we approach internships like, this is the job I want after, but you can have multiple internships. So one of the things that I learned, because I interned at, which is not to say anything pejorative about the Big Four, but I interned at one of the Big Four. And then at the end of that, I realized, no, this is not what I want to do. And that was great, because then I knew that after, graduating, I was not going to pursue an opportunity with a Big Four. There was something else for me.
So
Okay.
Kevin, what I would love to hit on is just the one about negotiating salary.
Great,
So,
thank you.
if you get a job offer and you don't negotiate it, at least I always think that's weird, right? Companies expect that you're going to at least come back and talk about something, whether it's salary, reload bonuses, something. So you want to respond to it. It's like buying a car. Whatever the dealer is listing it for, they don't expect to sell it for that price. So you should negotiate it, but only negotiate it once. If you come back and ask for something again, then the company starts, feeling like you're not the right fit. So go back one negotiation, try to get something more out of the offer, and then accept it.
For our attendees, just in case they couldn't see that, a question was asked about salary negotiation during the interview process. And so, I think Thomas's advice is spot on in terms of, you get one shot at this, and make sure you do your homework, do your research, and make your case. So thank you for that. We have a question here about distinguishing between tunnel vision versus grit. Who'd like to kind of take that one on?
I'll just say quickly, I don't have to be the only person that takes it on, but I will say quickly that you can tell when you are swimming upstream. There's a difference between being in the flow of things and hitting snags, but feeling a sense of momentum and progress versus swimming upstream and working your tail off to very, very rarely make a little eeny bit of progress. And if you're in the latter and you're still pursuing it doggedly, it's tunnel vision.
That was phenomenal. That's fantastic. I'm going to throw out one last question for our panelists, and I think it's going to be unique for each person. Since we are talking about the future here, I would like to ask, what do you believe will be the most disruptive force in your particular industry in the next decade? So what do you believe will be the most disruptive force in your particular industry in the next decade?
Yeah, I'll kick it off with just a global focus towards reducing carbon emissions. That's what is driving a lot of change going on and across many different industries.
Thank you.
And mine is similar, and I think it's not industry specific. It's, the next decade, the number one issue that affects all of us is climate. And that's what it is. If you still are at a point where you think that, we have time, we really don't. And we're going to see massive effects of it. We're already seeing it in the next 10 years.
Racial justice. I think racial justice is so deeply tied to working against forces of capitalism. And I just think we're going to have to wildly embrace some pretty massive systemic change if we are going to create the world and the work environments that we wish to live in that are anti-racist and anti-oppression.
Lisa, you have the final word.
Yes, I'll piggyback off Renee. I definitely agree. That justice and racial justice is going to be the number one thing at Gartner as well. But also, I think to disrupt our industry is going to be technology and how the technology continues to grow at firms and at our clients, and how we can provide that service to help really drive their organizations forward and stay in our position in capturing as much data and market research ahead of time before our clients beat us to that. So it's a constant race game or change game to keep up here at Gartner. And I think that's going to be the biggest one for Gartner.
Well, Renee, Lisa, Leah, Thomas, I want to thank you for joining us today. I wanted, on behalf of all of our attendees, the information that you have given, my mind is just going at 100 miles an hour. I really appreciate it. Again, this is so important not to think about, okay, what am I going to be doing a year from now, but looking into that future, making sure that we're preparing ourselves for a career and not just a job, and that future world of work. You've been great examples of how to navigate that, great models for us to follow and to to mimic in terms of handling those disruptive forces and those future skills. And so thank you so much for your time today. And for all our attendees, thank you for joining us. And we hope to have you on another webinar soon. Enjoy the day. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.